Welcome to the deep dive. We take the sources you share and really try to pull out the insights you're looking for.
Get straight to the point.
Exactly. And today we're tackling something pretty fundamental, actually, consistency.
Yes. The secret sauce, maybe.
Could be. We're looking specifically at how that steady, unwavering approach, how that's the real power behind getting to advanced English fluency.
Mm-hmm.
Especially for you C1 learners out there who already have a really strong grip on the language.
Right, you're polishing, not building from scratch.
And not just language, but also for making those big, maybe even kind of audacious dreams happen.
Mm-hmm.
Our main source today is an article called The Unwavering Rhythm, How Consistency Conducts Fluency and Orchestrates Your Biggest Dreams.
Quite a title.
It is. So our mission really is to unpack how this consistent effort works, how it's the engine for, well, both language mastery and achieving life goals.
To give practical takeaways, right? Not just theory.
Absolutely. Real strategies, inspiring stories, hopefully something to ignite your own consistent action. Think of it like, you're conducting this grand symphony.
Your life, your goals.
Yeah. And consistency. Well, that's the baton.
Okay, I like that analogy. And what's interesting, right from the get-go, is how the article really zeroes in on C1 learners specifically.
Right. Why is that focus so important, do you think?
Well, like you said, you're not beginners. You've put in the work. You've got a high level. So the challenge changes, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. It's about getting to that next stage, that truly kind of effortless communication.
The subtle stuff.
Exactly. The article points out that progress now is less about huge leaps and more about refining things, understanding nuances, using idioms naturally, getting that feel for the rhythm, the prosody, and that kind of deep integration. The article argues that's precisely where consistency has its biggest impact.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's definitely different from, say, cramming for a test back in school.
Totally different.
The article says consistent engagement etches into your linguistic DNA. That's quite an image.
It really is. It suggests something much deeper, more permanent than just memorization.
So for listeners at that C1 stage, aiming even higher, what are some, concrete ways to actually weave this consistency into their language learning day to day?
Well, the article gives some really good practical ideas. One I like was the daily dose idea, or minimum viable engagement.
Minimum viable engagement sounds very businesslike.
Maybe. But the principle is solid. It's about finding the smallest amount of focused English interaction you can realistically commit to almost every single day.
Okay, so not necessarily hours, but something manageable.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And they give examples like maybe 20 minutes reading opinion pieces, really digging into the arguments, the tone.
Okay.
Or maybe 15 minutes listening to a challenging podcast, focusing on, natural speech patterns.
Or even just 10 minutes journaling.
Yeah, but journaling with intent.
Yeah.
Like consciously trying out complex sentences or new vocab. The key thing seems to be that frequency every single day, or very nearly, establishing that rhythm.
Right, that continuous flow. But making it happen every day can be tough.
It can, which leads nicely into the next idea, habit stacking.
Linking it to something you already do.
Exactly. Piggybacking the new habit onto an existing one makes it much more likely to stick.
So what would that look like for English?
Well, the examples were things like listening to English news with your morning coffee, or reviewing a couple of idioms while you commute.
Or reading a bit in English before bed.
Perfect.
Yeah.
It becomes part of the routine, not this extra thing you have to find willpower for.
Because willpower, that definitely runs out.
Doesn't it just?
Yeah.
Another angle the article explores is theming your weeks or months.
Ooh, I like the sound of that. Keeps things fresh.
Exactly. Instead of just randomly consuming English, you give yourself a focus for a week or even a month. Maybe one week you dive into political commentary, read different newspapers, listen to debates.
Okay.
Then the next week, maybe switch to contemporary fiction. Pay attention to how dialogue flows, how narratives are built.
Or even a specific topic, like science news, to build vocabulary in that area.
Spot on. It stops things getting stale and makes sure you're getting diverse exposure, not just sticking to what you know.
That makes a lot of sense. But it's not just about taking English in, is it? The article stresses output, too.
Oh, absolutely crucial. Input is vital, but fluency really blooms when you're consistently producing the language, using it actively.
So how do you build consistency in output?
One great suggestion was finding a consistency partner.
Someone to practice with regularly.
Yeah, maybe commit to, say, a 30-minute chat twice a week. But focus on discussing more complex topics. pushing yourselves a bit.
The regularity is key there, isn't it?
Totally. It builds in accountability, gives you that reliable space to practice speaking.
What else for output?
Well, back to journaling, but journaling with intent. Really pushing yourself to use new words, complex structures. Maybe even trying to mimic the style of a writer you admire.
A conscious effort to stretch your writing skills.
Exactly. And another one, which I thought was quite clever, was low-stakes presentations.
Low stakes, as in not scary.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Just getting into the habit of explaining something you've learned could be anything out loud in English, to a friend, or even just to yourself.
Ah, so you practice formulating thoughts and speaking without the pressure of a big audience?
Right. Builds confidence for when the stakes are higher.
Okay, so consistent input, consistent output. What about remembering all this new stuff? Vocabulary, idioms.
Good point. That leads to micro-review for macro retention.
Micro-review, meaning little and often.
Exactly. Forget marathon cramming sessions. The article advocates for short, frequent reviews of smaller batches of words or phrases, and crucially, reviewing them in context.
It's not just lists.
Definitely not just lists. They mention spaced repetition systems, SRS apps, which can help schedule reviews.
Those algorithm things.
Yeah, but the real emphasis is on then using those reviewed items in your own speaking or writing, actively integrating them.
So maybe just 5 or 10 minutes a day?
Much better than an hour once a week, according to the article. More manageable, more effective for long-term retention.
Makes sense. And what about getting corrected? Feedback.
Also vital, especially at this level. The article calls it consistent engagement with native-level feedback.
Native level. Why is that distinction important?
Because at C1, your errors are often more subtle, right? Things like word choice, collocation, flow, maybe even intonation, things a non-native might miss.
Ah, okay, so you need someone with that intuitive feel.
Exactly. Getting regular, detailed feedback from a good tutor or a patient native speaker can highlight patterns you weren't even aware of, help you break through plateaus.
Even brief, regular sessions would be useful then.
Definitely. And the final tip for language learning was about embracing productive discomfort.
Productive discomfort sounds slightly painful.
Huh? Maybe a little. But it's about intentionally putting yourself in situations where your English is stretched, but in a good way, a way that promotes growth.
Like what, for instance?
Maybe listening to really fast talkers, where you have to strain to keep up, or joining a quick-fire online debate.
Or reading text just slightly above your current comfort zone.
Precisely. The idea is consistent exposure to that challenge forces your brain to adapt faster. You're regularly stretching those linguistic muscles.
Okay, that makes sense. Not staying where it's easy.
Exactly. Now, these are all great principles, but the article really brings them to life with some stories, these global echoes.
Yes, the examples. Tell us about those.
First up is Dr. Lena Petrova, a historian moved from Russia to Germany. Her English was already C1 good enough for publishing papers,
Oh,
but she felt she wasn't quite catching the nuances in live conference discussions, the back and forth, the subtle cues.
right, the real-time interaction. So what does she do?
Her approach was super targeted and, crucially, consistent. She didn't just study English. She listened daily to BBC Radio 4 interviews, specifically analyzing the dynamics.
Okay, very specific.
Yeah. Joined an online debate club 3 times a week. And this is key. Every day, she'd verbally summarize an academic article for 3 minutes, record it, and critique herself.
Wow, that's dedication. And did it work?
Well, the article says after about 6 months, she noticed. Not a sudden miracle, but a gradual sharpening. She could anticipate arguments better, jump in more confidently, even land academic jokes.
So it was that relentless, daily, targeted effort.
Exactly. Small, consistent steps sharpening those advanced skills.
Great story. And there was another one?
Yes, Marco Rossi, a marketing guy from Italy, working in Ireland. His English was grammatically spot on.
Well, always a but.
But he felt it sounded a bit stilted, formal, not quite natural in professional chats.
I think many learners can relate to that feeling. What was his consistency compact?
Also very intentional. Daily TED Talk, no subtitles, and then explaining it to his flatmate.
Active recall right there.
Yep. Daily article from somewhere like Wired, noting down vocab and interesting sentences. And quite bravely, he joined an amateur dramatics group.
Acting in English. Wow.
Yeah. And he found that through all this consistent practice, especially the acting, The sort of separate Italian Marco and English-speaking Marco started to merge.
He became more integrated.
Exactly. More confident, his ideas landed better.
Yeah.
It really shows how pushing yourself out of your comfort zone consistently can be transformative.
Both fantastic examples. And what's really striking is how the same principle, consistency, applies just as much to, well, everything else we want to achieve in life, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The article makes that transition really smoothly, whether it's a startup, learning music, writing, social change, whatever your big dream is. Consistency is the pace setter.
The engine, the conductor, we got lots of metaphors.
We do. But why is it so powerful for these big life goals? The article breaks that down too. First up, the compound effect.
Like compound interest, but for effort.
Pretty much. Think about daily vocabulary. Learning tiny bits add up to a huge vocabulary over time. It's the same with dreams. Each day's work is like one brick.
Eventually building the whole thing, yeah.
Then there's momentum building.
Getting started is the hardest part, right?
Often, yeah. But consistent small actions create this forward push. It gets easier to keep going, helps you overcome procrastination.
Like a flywheel starting to spin faster.
Good one. And related to that is skill development and mastery. Expertise in any field rarely just happens.
No sudden flashes of genius, usually.
Right. It's almost always the result of consistent practice, refining, learning, showing up day after day, coding, painting, leadership, you name it.
Definitely. And what about when other people are involved in your dreams, like investors or partners?
Big factor there, building trust and credibility. If people see you consistently putting in the effort, communicating reliably, they're much more likely to trust you to back your vision.
Your consistency shows your commitment.
Exactly. And it works internally, too. The article talks about reinforcing identity and belief.
That's so.
Every time you follow through on your consistent action, you're telling yourself, I'm the kind of person who does this. I'm capable. I'm committed.
So you build self-belief through action.
Precisely. It creates this positive feedback loop inside your own head, which is crucial when things get tough.
Which leads to the next point, I guess. Navigating setbacks.
You got it. Because setbacks will happen. Failure is a part of the process for any big goal.
Definitely.
But if you have a consistent approach, you don't just give up. You see the setback as data, information. You learn, you adjust, but you keep going. The consistency carries you through.
Okay, so the why is clear, consistency is powerful, but the how? How do we actually embed it in our lives when things get busy or motivation dips?
Right, the practical stuff. The article offers some great tips and tricks here. One is the don't break the chain method.
The Seinfeld strategy.
That's the one. Get a big wall calendar. Every day you do your task, even a small bit mark, a big X. You build a visual chain.
And you don't want to break it.
Exactly. It's surprisingly motivating, that visual.
I can see that. What else?
Time blocking for your priorities.
Yeah.
Actually scheduling time for your goals in your calendar like any other important appointment.
And treating it like a non-negotiable meeting with yourself.
Yep. Honoring that commitment. Then there's defining your minimum effective dose, the MED.
We touched on this for language. The smallest useful step.
Right. What's the smallest action you can realistically commit to every day that still moves you forward? Maybe it's writing 200 words or one sales call or 15 minutes of practice.
And the idea is you'll often do more, but hitting the MED keeps the consistency alive.
Exactly. It stops you feeling overwhelmed and ensures you always make some progress.
Smart. Keeps the momentum going.
And related to that is establishing rituals and routines. Our brains love routine, right?
Reduces decision fatigue.
For sure. So creating a specific ritual around your goal, like that entrepreneur researching their industry for 30 minutes every morning before emails, makes it easier to just get started.
Takes the thinking out of it, almost. What about seeing the progress?
Crucial. Track your progress and celebrate small wins. Keep a log, a journal, whatever works. Seeing how far you've come, even with small steps.
Is really motivating. And celebrating those little milestones helps, too.
Absolutely. Fuels you for the next step.
Yeah.
Keeps the journey rewarding.
Makes sense. What about staying on track when no one's watching?
Good question. That's where accountability structures come in.
Like telling someone your goals.
Yeah. Sharing your commitment with a mentor, a coach, a peer group, even just telling a friend or posting publicly, knowing you have to report back.
Can be a powerful push.
Definitely. But the article also says be realistic. Prepare for dips and plateaus.
Because motivation won't always be high, right?
Exactly. Progress isn't always linear. Things will feel slow sometimes. Consistency is most important then.
So what do you do in those dips?
Have strategies ready. Maybe switch to an easier related task for a quick win. Or really reconnect with your, why did you start this in the first place?
Remind yourself of the bigger picture.
Yeah. And try to focus on the process, not just the outcome.
Enjoy the journey, not just the destination.
Kind of. If you can find satisfaction in the daily work itself, consistency becomes much more sustainable than if you're only focused on that far-off goal.
Makes it less of a grind.
Right. And finally, review and adjust consistently. Consistency doesn't mean doing the same ineffective thing over and over.
So it's not blind repetition.
Not at all. It means consistently engaging with the process of improvement. Regularly step back, see what's working, what's not, and tweak your approach. Maintain the effort, but refine the strategy.
Okay, those are some really solid, actionable strategies, and the article gives us more stories to illustrate these, right? Global citizens, consistent dreams.
It does. First, Dr. Alara Vance, a U.S. scientist, her dream, a really ambitious one, developing new carbon capture technology.
Yeah.
Huge challenge.
Okay. How did consistency play a role?
Her rhythm was incredible.
Yeah.
For nearly a decade. Weekdays, specific morning hours for theoretical modeling, afternoons in the lab, even when experiments failed repeatedly.
Wow, that takes resilience.
It really does. And she even spent weekends reading outside her field just to spark new connections.
So was there a big eureka moment?
Apparently not. It was the slow accumulation of tiny insights, tiny breakthroughs born from that relentless daily grind. Consistency, even through failure, eventually led to a viable prototype.
That's a powerful lesson about long-term goals. Daily commitment, even when it feels like you're getting nowhere.
Absolutely. Then there's Jamal Al-Farsi, moved from Oman to the UK, wanted to start a social enterprise for refugee artisans, faced language barriers, resource limits, lots of hurdles.
Sounds tough. What was his consistent action?
Driven by his vision, he carved out time every single day. Specific time for improving his business English, specific time for researching fair trade, online platforms, and consistent networking, just one email, one coffee meeting at a time.
Small, incremental steps.
Exactly. He faced rejections, setbacks, but he just kept showing up, doing those small things consistently.
And the outcome.
Gradually, it all added up. He secured a grant, built partnerships with artisans, launched a successful online store. It really shows how those seemingly tiny daily efforts accumulate into something significant.
Incredible stories. They really hammer home that core message, don't they? Whether it's language fluency or life dreams, consistency is the common thread.
It really is. And the article sums it up beautifully in the end, talking about the symphony of self. These aren't separate journeys, mastering language, pursuing dreams. They're parallel paths.
Both powered by consistency.
Right. The discipline you build learning English, that same focus, that perseverance, it directly fuels your ability to tackle other big ambitions.
So every consistent effort in language is like an investment.
An investment in yourself, yeah. And every consistent step towards your dream is like an affirmation saying, I can do this.
It really does shift your mindset, doesn't it? From I wish I could to I am actually doing this. I am becoming.
Exactly. It turns vague hopes into unfolding realities.
Yeah.
So for you listening to the C1 learner with big aspirations, you've already got the strong language base. The dreams are there.
Consistency is the missing piece, the catalyst.
It's the catalyst, the compass, the rhythm section. It shapes your words, shapes your actions, guides you towards mastery and achieving those goals, your life's masterpiece. It needs its consistent conductor.
Love that final image. Okay, so to quickly recap this deep dive, we've seen just how vital consistency is for pushing past C1 fluency, for realizing major life goals.
And we've looked at practical ways to build it, backed up by some really inspiring real-world examples. It's not magic, it's steady effort.
Absolutely. So maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. Consider just one small area. Could be English practice, could be a personal project. Where could you apply just a tiny daily dose of consistency starting now?
Just one small thing.
Yeah. And then imagine, what kind of crescendo, what kind of amazing result might that consistent action create over the next few months or even years?
Food for thought.
Definitely. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive.